Welcome everybody to Fact Fridays. I'm here today with Andy Park, co-founder of TeamCentral. Andy, this first question comes in two parts. First, customers are talking more and more about application integration. First, what's the difference in iPaaS, no-code, low-code, and typical API integration? And in this established market, how does TeamCentral differentiate from its competitors?
Yeah, good question, Steve. The first part of that question really comes down to the idea that there are fundamental things that need to be built by software developers in a more traditional integration approach, like a point-to-point integration between APIs. You have to build the framework for the integration. You have authentication, you've got connectivity, you have to use tools for testing, version control. You're working with a variety of different tools and frameworks, and it's just a very traditional way to build integrations or applications. It's custom development. And so when you're connecting to APIs, you're essentially doing custom integration between those two, and that's a hardwired connection. And as system changes occur, those types of integrations can become brittle. They can break. Hopefully the developer that built it is still around, because usually the integrations aren't super well documented, or the documentation quickly goes out of date. And so you run into all sorts of maintainability issues. I also think that they tend to be, those types of integrations tend to be buggy, because wiring together all those different parts of the framework, as I mentioned before, authentication and connectivity and testing and versions and things like that. It takes a pretty experienced person to know how to do that. So what no-code, low-code iPaaS does is it eliminates many of those kind of foundational elements in the integration build that that really are kind of commodity and are based on best practice. So you don't have to build all those and spend a lot of time building fundamental things that just take time and have to be wired together properly. So in an iPaaS situation, all of that stuff, all that kind of technical goo is eliminated. It's abstracted from the build process, and instead what you can spend most of your time on is really understanding the use cases that you have to configure. So using an iPaaS allows you to avoid having to do all that kind of fundamental framework, infrastructure, security, authentication kind of build activity, and that can save you a tremendous amount of time. It really allows you to, an iPaaS allows you to focus more of your attention on data sources and the data elements that need to be passed back and forth between those data sources, and that can be done in an orchestrated fashion, which is much more of a workflow oriented fashion, or in the case of TeamCentral's iPaaS called Central, we prefer to use a more of an event stream kind of model, which is a publish subscribe type of model. And I'll highlight maybe the differentiators between Central and some of the competitors. Many of the competitors out there, and you've heard them, Del Boomi, Celigo, Jitterbit, Zapier, a number of these things. Some are citizen developer tools, some are more enterprise scale, like MuleSoft. We intentionally built kind of an enterprise grade solution that can handle very complex use cases like a MuleSoft or Informatica can, but with the added benefit of more of a citizen developer, GUI based interface that's much more drag and drop and configurable and frankly easier to implement. All of those solutions out there have great customer stories and can solve problems in their own way. We tend to focus specifically on data quality As a result, we've taken our 20, 25 years experience working with enterprise systems and enterprise data, and we've built an enterprise data model into our platform. And that's something that I would argue you will not find in many of the systems that are out there, that tend to focus more on passing data back and forth versus kind of validating that the data conforms to a standard data model that's pretty commonly accepted in all the best of breed ERP, CRM, HR systems. So that the enterprise data model that's built into our platform is we definitely view that as a differentiator. It makes the configuration of the integration go much more quickly. In fact, in many cases, our templatized connectors that can be stood up in a matter of minutes. 80% of the integration is usually accommodated, and then you spend most of your time the other 20% addressing custom fields and things like that need to be mapped, as well as data filters, business rules, transformations. All that is contained within our solution. The other thing I think is, so that data quality is super important, and that's a primary focus. And I would argue that many others do not focus on kind of programmatic data governance and data quality. The other thing that I think is really interesting about our platform is it was honestly built for developers, with developers in mind. And so developers tend to think of things in terms of this an SDLC, a software development lifecycle. You've got design, build, test, deploy, monitor. Those are all just, that's part of the standard methodology for implementing software. And so that SDLC is actually built into our no-code platform. We believe it's one of the first of its kind out in the market. Last thing I'd say is we built our platform specifically to be very open. Most developers, historically have resisted these low no-code solutions because they feel like they've lost control of the development process. They want to be in the weeds. They want to understand how everything works and kind of how every part of the sausage is made, if you will. In our solution, we create a very open development environment. Everything's transparent. If you're in there build integrations, you can see how the data sources are connected, how the data filters work, the business rules work, and you have direct influence on those things. There are many IPaaS solutions out there that take more of a black box approach, where as long as you're connecting one API to another, and you've mapped the data properly, that data gets from point A to point B, which is great, and it works. But you really can't see what's happening behind the scenes. And so again, we've made a very deliberate attempt at trying to make this the most open IPaaS platform in the marketplace. I think that's an important differentiator. The last thing I'd say, Steve, is that we have recently released a pretty exciting monitoring and dashboard capability, which allows you to drill down multiple layers into the messaging queue, inspect those messages, the payloads. It makes it very easy to do some forensic analysis on the data that's actually being kept in sync between systems. You can identify where there are discrepancies, correct those, and even reprocess the transactions. And I think that's super important, and very typical request from our customers is to have that kind of visibility into the data syncing that's going on. I'm not sure if I hit on the event-driven nature of our solution. I know that some of the other solutions out there can do more of a publish subscribe kind of model. And what this essentially means is, if an event occurs in a CRM system, for example, and a customer address, is updated, that publishes, the data associated with that transaction to Central. Central takes that, does what it needs to with it. It could filter the data, it could transform the data, and then Central then publishes that information out to any other system that cares about it, and that those systems then can consume the information and do what they need to with it. So it's a really more of a hub and spoke model. Many of the solutions that are out there use what's called an orchestrated model. Think of it more in terms of a workflow where, point A, an event occurs in point A, and then it has to go to point B, which is maybe some kind of ETL or, ETL process. You're going to extract the information. You're going to dump it into a database, and then there's some kind of script that runs over the database and parses out the data or transforms it or whatever, and then maybe loads it into a staging location, which is then picked up, at a later date. I mean, that's much more of an orchestrated workflow oriented model, and those work especially well. And in fact, they in my opinion, they work really well when it's a more human centric type of integration. There might be some approvals in the process and things like that need to occur. The problem with those types of integrations is that they are multi-step, and it's very difficult to test at the endpoints without having to do a complete end-to-end test. So we can do very real-time development. We can create automated tests against those endpoints. Because of the nature of the event-driven design, our integrations are much more loosely coupled. The CRM system and the ERP system are not directly connected. They really don't know about each other. All they know about is the agent that we have listening for business events or transactions to occur, and whether or not they're publishing or subscribing or both to that information. And so that very loosely coupled design makes for a very reliable integration. As system changes occur, let's say we had an ERP system go down at one of our clients, and the integrations that were supposed to be happening were messages, metadata messages that were spooling up and couldn't be delivered because the ERP was down. Once the ERP came back up, we had that message queue, and we were able to reprocess all those transactions. A lot of times, if you have a system go down in a more orchestrated or point-to-point type of integration, you just frankly lose, the data. It does not make its way to the destination or is confirmed as a successful delivery. So that is a major flaw in kind of a hardwired point-to-point integration, and that's why people are moving to iPaaS.
Awesome answers, Andy. Everyone, please join us for our Fact Fridays weekly. You can also find us on the web at teamcentral.ai, or you can search us up on LinkedIn and follow us, please, at TeamCentral. Look forward to seeing you guys again. Thanks.